Have you heard about LeadSpeak? LeadSpeak is an awesome developer conference. This year is coming to Stockholm, the 19th of October. I will be there and I will speak about architecture of DevOps. I hope to see you there too. Go to leadspeak.se to buy tickets. It only costs 200 Swedish crowns. Hi and welcome to App in the Cloud. I'm back now after a few months without recordings, but today I have a really interesting guest, Jérôme Laban, and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, who is Jérôme Laban?
I'm the CTO of the Uno Platform project. It's a project that we started a while back that allows to do mobile and web development at the same time using the same code base, using iOS, Android, and WebAssembly. So it's all about code reuse.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm a big fan of Xamarin and Xamarin Forms, so I think it's really interesting to have a discussion with you about code sharing and mobile applications.
Yes. And we announced at UnoConf, which was a few days ago, something that will mix and blur the lines a even more with the support for Xamarin Forms using Uno on WebAssembly. So it's even more things to talk about.
Yeah, we can talk about that a little bit later. But for the listener, what is Uno or you say Uno or the Uno platform, or
so it's Uno Platform. So publicly we mostly say Uno Platform, but as a short Uno works as well. It's just that in some cases people that do not know about it may confuse it with something else. So we say Uno Platform as a whole. But Uno Platform is basically it's an open source project. We started it a very long time ago internally at Inventive, the company that started it. It's we've been working on it for the past 6 years or so. So it's been a long while. The point of that is we were developing applications for Windows, Windows 8, Windows 10, Windows Phone at the time. And when we saw that people were asking for a lot of iOS and Android applications, then we said, well, we have a lot of XAML and C# developers. So what could we do to go and reuse all those skills for developers and integrators that were doing XAML and C# at the time? And we saw that Xamarin was able to do what we needed at the C# level, so we were missing the UI part. So we started developing that privately for our own needs to make applications. At the time, Xamarin Forms wasn't available, by the way. So that's why we started at that route. And fast forward a bit, then Xamarin Forms appeared, and we saw what Xamarin Forms was doing. And at the time, it was not the right choice for us because we wanted to have very, very rich and complex applications, and Xamarin Forms was not able to do that at the time. So we continue down the road, and fast forward to 2018, Xamarin WebAssembly appears, and we say, well, we cannot keep that to ourselves. I mean, privately for that long, and we said, well, let's go and open source it. So at Build in 2018, we open sourced the whole thing. So that means that we open sourced the support for iOS, Android, and WebAssembly at the same time. So we have a lot of applications that are now producing allowing for developers to create their applications on all those platforms, and it's free. It's free. It's open source, so anyone can use it and can contribute. And it's been a very fun adventure since then. And now with UnoConf, we can talk about that afterwards.
Okay, so you have worked with it for about 4 or 5 years, and then you open source it. Have you used it for your own projects only,
exactly,
or have you have other developers working with it?
It's mostly it was mostly for us internally, but we had also clients of ours that were taking over development of applications that we made, so they're using Uno as well. So they're clients of the Uno platform. So basically they're requesting professional services from us to add or bug fixes or add features to provide them the right feature sets for the platforms that they're targeting.
Okay, so you're using UWP XAML for the UI, and you have the Xamarin platform in the bottom. Do you have a similar concept to Xamarin Forms with renders, or how is Uno built up using custom, not custom, native UI for each platform, or how do it work?
So let's put Xamarin Forms on the side for now because it's something else. But if we're talking specifically about what the Uno platform is able to do in terms of showing content on the screen, that's really what it goes down to. We're talking about there are two. If you look at the spectrum of platforms that do UI rendering, you're going to have two ends. The first one is drawing natively, which is taking everything that the UI, the underlying platform provides. So on iOS and Android, you're going to use native buttons, you're going to use native app bars and things like that, and toggle switches and things like that. And while that provides a very integrated experience with the platform, it causes some trouble in some cases where you have picky designers that and for good reasons, they want to have something that looks the same on all platforms. And with those frameworks, it can be difficult to do so. So you can do it, but it's not always going to be exactly the same. For Xamarin Forms, it changed a bit with the introduction of material design, but the material feature. But there are still cases where you need to use renders for the native platform, so it's not exactly the same. On the other end, you're going to see frameworks that actually do their own rendering completely. So it's basically exactly the same for all platforms. But the problem with that approach is that you're going to have issues with the integration with the platform. So for instance, if you want to do a text box, for instance, that text box, if you want to do, let's say, IME, copy paste, accessibility and things like that, then it becomes a bit more complicated because having access to those features is sometimes difficult, sometimes not possible at all because it's what the platform provides. So it gives another set of problems. So your UI is really nice on all platforms, but you have another set of problems. Flutter is like that, for instance, but they have other kinds of issues. Like, for instance, they did have a map control for quite a while because they cannot integrate with the platforms quite easily. So that's kind of the two ends of the spectrum that you can find. And what we choose to do is to go right in the middle because we're relying on iOS and Android, but we can also draw completely custom content. So when we're talking, let's say, a toggle switch with Uno, you can change the style. You were using styling to show the toggle switch. So you can choose to have the exact same style on all platforms using pure XAML, or you can use the native style to show the iOS toggle switch or the Android toggle switch, and that's where you can choose. And you can even change it at runtime if you want, using a data binding on style. So that's the kind of thing where we're standing on for styling.
Okay, that's pretty nice to have that option.
Yes.
You can use the native control if you want, but you can also draw it.
Yes, exactly.
Or how you do it. So, okay. If we're talking about UWP XAML, there are a lot of things in there.
Yes.
How much of it do you support for iOS, Android, and WebAssembly as well?
So that's the UWP API or WinRT or WinUI. There's multiple names. Let's say WinRT and WinUI because UWP is the container. It's not really the API set. So let's go for WinRT and WinUI. It's huge. The API set is humongous. There's so many APIs that are available there, and we haven't implemented all of them, of course. And the way Uno works is basically that we took the UWP, the WinRT DLLs, and we basically generated stubs for everything. So that means that if there is some code that you've written that targets a UWP application, so WinRT, then you can take that code and compile it against Uno because it's the same API. But what that means is that it's not because it's not even if it compiles, it may not work because we may not have implemented the APIs that you're using. So to answer your question, what do we support on iOS? Well, we have we have a on the API on the NuGet package that we provide, we have a set of attributes that we place on classes and methods and attributes that tell you if a type or a method or an attribute is implemented or not in Uno. So you can follow and see if that code is going to work. So let's say geolocation, for instance. Geolocation is something that we needed to have on iOS and Android. It's not yet implemented on WebAssembly, but because a browser provides access to geolocation, then it's quite easy to add that support. And I think we have a pull request open to add that support at this time. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at. It's not uniform. Some platforms have support for it. Some platforms don't have support for it. Sometimes we have added support for it, but the other platforms don't support it at all. Let's say NFC, for instance. There's no way in a browser to use NFC. But that's the kind of thing that we're looking at. So it's not perfectly aligned because either we need support for it or because it's not possible. So that's the kind of things that is available with Uno.
Okay, I thought Uno was just the UI part, the XAML part of WinRT.
No, it goes way larger than that.
That's cool.
We had to get everything because we cannot just pick and choose parts of it. So where we're aiming at is making the UWP really universal, not just for Windows. It's about getting all platforms at once. And we have a contributor, Martin Zickman, that is doing a lot of those integrations. I think he added the barometer or gyroscope recently in a pull request. So that's the kind of thing that we're aiming for that kind of support.
Okay, how about the tooling? I guess you're using Visual Studio and you can probably use the UWP designer and things like that. And then after that, take it back to the other platforms.
Yes. So the main point of the Uno, developing an application with Uno and what we call the inner dev loop is about using Visual Studio, and we found that the tooling, deployment time, and debuggability, and all of that is provided by the UWP support in Windows is pretty good when you compare it to let's say deploying an application on Android or iOS for that matter. Features like XAML edit and continue, the actual one that Microsoft actually renamed to hot reload, which is not exactly the same. Where if you look at the Xamarin Forms support or even the Uno support for hot reload, this is actual hot reload. That means that you make a change and the content is completely reloaded on the app, so the UI is completely refreshed. But on the UWP side, you can change one character, and it's gonna be let's make a very specific change for the element that you change. So it's not reloading the whole thing. It's actual edit and continue. So I'm editing the content, and it just updates the app. So that's the kind of thing that makes it very easy to work with. So the point is, make the application run, let's say 95% down the road on Windows, and the last 5%, then you go onto the application running on iOS or the web or Android, and hope it works. That's our promise. It's to make your application work on all platforms at once, with developing it all on Windows and just finishing it up on the others.
Okay, I remember even when I developed Xamarin Forms apps for Windows, iOS, and Android. Windows was always my first platform because it was much easier to work with. You get better error messages and things like that if you compare it to the iOS and the Android world. So.
Yeah, that's why we chose to keep that route, and it's been serving us pretty well up to now, and seeing that Microsoft is pushing in terms of tooling to get something that works properly. Thanks Daniel, that's working on it, and it's pretty good to see. So we'll see in the future, but it's pretty good to know.
Yeah. But we talked about hot reload, and you said you also have a hot reload. Can you use some of the Xamarin tooling or the Microsoft tooling, or have you built your own hot reload tool?
So it's our own hot reload. So the point was to be able to use it on WebAssembly. So that means that it's about communicating with the browser, and communicating with the browser is not that easy. The other way forward. So the tooling from Microsoft is closed source, so we can't modify it, we can't see how it works. So we had to build our own. We're using WebSockets to communicate with the browser, and it makes it very easy for us to just update some content. So it's in preview. It's quite easy to install, and you just update your XAML in Visual Studio. Just goes over to the browsers, just updates, and then you see your content. Same thing for iOS and Android. So it's let's say it eases up the development loop for the last 5% that we're aiming for to get something running on the device.
Okay. I guess you see WebAssembly part of Uno as a big part of the future.
Yes,
because it's a way of developing app and a hosting model, or whatever you want to call it, that is increasing in interest in all part of the development world.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts about WebAssembly? What would the future for WebAssembly be? Will we build more and more apps in WebAssembly in the future, or what's the current state of it?
So WebAssembly is a very big topic.
It was a long question.
Yeah,
now.
no problem. It's that's mostly a thing about what WebAssembly is. So it's let's say most of the time people are just hearing about WebAssembly and have not done anything with it because it's quite difficult to get to it. Most of the languages that are providing access to it are mostly what we call in managed languages, so C, C++, and the support for it, or Rust for that matter, the community is very large, or seemingly large. That's difficult to get to figure out. But anyways, the point is that WebAssembly is something that let's say is focusing development for a browser in a way that hasn't happened for a long time. We're talking about something that gives back developers the ability to choose whatever they want in terms of programming languages, and get access to all sorts of features that JavaScript doesn't provide. So it's a game changer. That means that very old applications that have been developed in old languages or let's say unmanaged languages such as C and C++ or any kind of other languages to go and access the web, which was not possible before. And that means that for .NET and Mono specifically, anything that's been developed in using .NET Standard 2 is able to run in the browser, given that it doesn't go too deep in terms of OS support. But let's say any library like JSON.NET or similar things like that just work as is in the browser. So what we see of interest there in terms of WebAssembly is the fact that we can just remove the constraint that people developing applications on mobile are having with stores. And stores are a big problem because you have to go through the validation of the store to make sure that your app is going to end up in that store. That means that you have times, you have timing issues, you may have content restriction and things like that, or you cannot put whatever you want in those applications that are on mobile devices. So that's where WebAssembly is going to be very interesting, because it just frees up the web and it frees up applications as well.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about Mono. You're using Mono in the bottom exactly as Blazor do, or?
So not exactly in the same way.
No, okay, not exactly, but you're using it.
We're using it. We're using Blazor. The only thing that differs from Blazor. So Blazor, to explain what that is, it's a framework that is developed by Microsoft. That is using Mono for WebAssembly, and that is using Razor templates to render content on the web. So it's all about using HTML as a front end, as a UI language, but using C# to manipulate the rest, and no JavaScript. And it's relying on Mono. And we are also in the Uno platform relying on Mono. And where I'm saying we're a bit different is that the bootstrapping that is needed to initialize an Uno application is not the same as the one that is available on Blazor. And there's another big difference. Blazor does not support AOT. So AOT is the acronym for ahead of time compilation, and it means that the code that is running in Blazor is interpreted. So it's not exactly WebAssembly. It's IL that is executed in a WebAssembly virtual machine. So it's a WebAssembly runtime. So it's the interpreter, and that means that the code that is running in that mode is about 50 times slower than it should be if it were directly in WebAssembly. And I've been working with the guys at the mono the with the mono runtime to add that support. And they've been developing that for a while, and they've been reusing things that they've been doing for iOS, and it's coming back to the web. So there's a few things that we've been doing that Blazor is not able to do yet, such as also one big feature is pinvoke. Where with Mono you can do pinvoke into another WebAssembly module, which enable the Uno calculator, the port from the Windows calculator. So that's the kind of things that we're able to do using Uno and WebAssembly that Blazor is not able to do yet.
Okay, really interesting. So you can say that you have better performance with Uno if you compare to Razer.
Yes, it's
in
with
many
Blazor.
cases at least.
Yes, so there's a drawback though, and that's the reason why Blazor is not using it yet. Is that the WebAssembly that's generated by Mono is quite big, and we're talking, let's say the calculator, for instance, we're talking uncompressed. The WebAssembly payload is about 30 megabytes. So it can be quite big, and the problem is that, and that's the big difference between what Blazor is doing and what Uno is doing. Blazor is targeting web applications, so something that websites. My apologies, websites. Where the load time has to be very, very fast. It has to be below, let's say, below a second, for instance. When we're talking about a web app, it's okay to have something that takes a bit more time to load for the first time, but afterwards, if it's loaded, then it loads up instantly. It's gonna kind of like comparing the New York Times websites with Gmail, for instance. The expectations of load time are not the same.
Yeah. Okay. How about third-party components for the Uno platform? I guess the most Windows WinRT components will work, and
third-party components are something that are very interesting. We've been trying to port most of the public APIs libraries that we've found. So, for instance, let's say Reactive UI. We've ported over Reactive UI so that you can reuse all the development that has been done in Reactive UI. There's also MVVM Lite. There's also the Windows Community Toolkit is an interesting one as well. It's a very, very big API, a very big library that provides a lot of controls. So not all of them are working, but we're improving Uno so that most of those controls can be working, as is. We added support for the tap control. The tap control that's available in the toolkit. We added support for it, so that's the kind of thing that we're looking at. But there's also other companies that are looking into it. So we have Syncfusion that has announced official support for it. So they're actively working on it and working with us to get their controls working on all platforms at once. And there's also it seems like Sam Basu from Telerik is also looking at it. So wait and see for Telerik as well. So that's the kind of thing that we're looking at and for support. So maybe we're going to be having some more support coming in the future. We will see about that.
Okay, that's cool. Can you use, for example, Xamarin Essentials and the Xamarin plugins?
So yes, the Xamarin Essentials plugins do work. They're not related to Xamarin Forms, so that means that they work directly in any Xamarin app that is using an iOS and Android. We're looking at adding Xamarin Forms support, Xamarin Essentials support for WebAssembly as well. So that means that if there are some things that are using the UWP APIs in those, maybe at some point they're gonna work as well. So if you've been using that, then it will enable you to do many interesting things.
Okay, sounds really Really interesting.
Yes. We've been having a lot of fun developing that, that's for sure.
Okay. How actively are you working developing Uno? How many persons are regularly working with it?
So there's so the team fluctuates. It's all about the clients that we're getting. You can see in the contributors list the number of people that are working on it. The core team really is about 5 people, but there are lots of other external contributors, internal and external contributors, so it fluctuates quite a bit. But we're actively working on it, full time to get it running. But it's it's all about adoption. The more people are using it, the larger the team is going to get.
Yeah. Okay. So you developing it for the needs that you have with your customers.
Yes,
Is that
yes.
correct
So
to say that?
that's correct. And but it's actually customers. So there's 2 parts. The first part is inventive customers. So the company that is developing applications for customers. That's one client in a way for the Uno platform. But we also have clients that are using Uno that are not inventive clients. So those clients, they're requesting changes or updates or fixes and new features to get their application working, and it's not something that we're using for ourselves. So it's actually other clients that do.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Now when you have it open sourced, so of course all applications have similar issues and similar needs, but
Yes.
you will get feedback from others as well that maybe can improve the work you have with your customers, and but the community, as you say, can help
Yes.
to develop it and
Absolutely.
make it a better platform. So.
Absolutely, and that's we're getting a lot of pull requests to fix small things and big things.
Yeah, and that's probably one reason that you can have it out there for free as well.
Yes.
That it helps you, but it also helps the community.
That's open source.
Yeah, and I love that idea that you give back to the community, but the community also gives back to you.
Exactly.
So I don't know how much you are using, for example, Xamarin Forms or other cross-platform frameworks, libraries, or what do you want to call them? But how is the performance if you compare with, for example, Xamarin Forms? I guess it's natural to compare with Xamarin Forms
Of
because
course.
it's a Microsoft.NET framework.
Exactly. So performance is a bit difficult to compare apples to apples. Uno supports a richer API set, so there's quite a few features that are available in Uno that are not in Xamarin Forms. I can name a few, like dependency property inheritance. It's something that is used quite a bit when you're making content control. Let's say if you want to have all the let's say you have a new content control and you put in content there, you're putting in lots of text blocks there, and you want all the text that inside that content control to have the same font size and font weight. You can set it at the top, and then all the controls that are underneath are going to be getting the same kind of features. And that is something that if you're ignoring that feature and comparing, let's say, the performance of the two, then you may have something that is performing the same way.
Okay.
But if you're starting to use advanced features like that, or let's say run bindings and things like that, then it gets difficult to compare, because if you want to do that with Xamarin Forms, then you're going to have to use effects or custom renderers and things like that. So it may slow down the feature. It may slow down Xamarin Forms in some cases. So it's quite complex to use. It's mostly about the feature set and what you're using of that feature set. So we're making our best to make sure that the performance is top notch. But it's in many cases, as with any UI platform, you can make shitty code and make it run very slowly. So we have performance guidelines to make sure that you're not doing some things that are making your app slower. That's what it is.
And as you say, you can fuck up performance if you're using Objective C as well.
Yes,
So
yeah,
if you're doing it the wrong way, so you need to know your know the platform and how to.
Exactly. So that's where it goes. Really, it's all about choosing the right things to do, and it's that's why we provide a set of guidelines to make sure that you're following everything that makes it fast.
Okay. Was last week you have your conference, or
Yes.
2 weeks ago? Last week. Okay. Yeah. And then you announced that you can use Xamarin Forms in some way to get WebAssembly. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So we've seen quite a bit. Xamarin Forms is quite popular in the in the mobile world, and we've seen quite a few people that are saying, well, that's nice, I'm making my application run on iOS and Android, but what about the web? And there was no solution to do that. It's just write it in some other language. So there's Blazor, sure, but the UI needs to be rebuilt. I mean, it's not the same. Maybe you can reuse your view models, but that's pretty much it. You cannot. It's not the same UI. So the interesting part about how Xamarin Forms is structured is that it has a set of renderers, and it has a set of renderers for UWP. And because Uno is implementing UWP, the UWP API set, what we did is take the UWP renderers, build them on top of Uno, and make them run on WebAssembly. So basically what you end up having is a Xamarin Forms application that runs on the web via UWP renderers that are using Uno to render the content. So that's how it's structured.
It sounds pretty easy when you say it, but yeah, it's genius in some way also. So
yeah, it's and so in terms of the way it's structured, it's just for the user, we made it a very simple .NET new command. So basically, you go into your Xamarin Forms project, you .NET new a Xamarin Forms WebAssembly project. It adds something to your solution. You go into your solution, set the startup project to the UWP to the WebAssembly project, and that's it. Your application runs on the web. So given that you're not using things that are not supported by either Uno or the web, but that's what's going to happen there.
Yeah, but I guess if you want to start building WebAssembly apps, I guess this is not the recommended way, because you have an extra layer with render. So if you're using Uno directly or Windows RT APIs, you will have better performance.
Well, yeah, sure, of course. I mean, it's the same thing when we're talking about making an application that run directly with, if you're creating an application that runs directly on iOS. I mean, you're going to have better performance because you may not have the overhead of Xamarin Forms itself. So of course, in this case, then there's Xamarin Forms that's doing its own rendering and its own layouting, and then there's Uno underneath that's doing its own rendering. So of course, it's a layered cake of different technologies. I mean, and technically, Uno is using HTML underneath to render this content. So there's also a layer there to do layouting. So it's always about stacking. But it's a question of choice. I mean, if you want to do you use the UWP XAML completely, then you can go to Uno directly. But if you have an existing application that uses Xamarin Forms, well, that's something that you can do and just reuse what you've built for iOS and Android mostly and make it run on the web.
I think it's cool. I have to try that out with some of my Xamarin Forms apps.
Sure, it's quite easy to do. Let us know if there's something that don't work. It's in early stages, and we're seeing that there are a few things that need to be adjusted with Xamarin Forms, and we're working on those as we speak. But it's improving quickly.
Okay, sounds really interesting. And of course, I have to try out Uno as well and give it a real chance.
Of course, let us know.
But if I'm want to start developing Uno, how will I get started with it?
Okay, so it's pretty easy. Basically, you go if you have Visual Studio for Windows. For now, we do support only Visual Studio for Windows for creating templates. You can use Visual Studio for Mac if you have a template that's already existing. We're working on adding those templates for Mac. But if you're on Windows, basically you go to the extensions extension market. Search for Uno Platform. You're gonna get an add-in to install. Just add that, and then in your in your find new project boxes, then you're going to find 2 projects. The first one is an application template, so it gives you all the projects that you can that you need to be able to go for Windows, iOS, Android, and WebAssembly. And the other one is a control library template, so it makes it easier to reuse content between applications.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Really interesting. I really have to try that.
Please do. If you're doing
try
applications.
to build the same app with both Xamarin Forms and
Yeah.
Uno, see
Sure.
what I like the most and what the limitations is and how fast it will be to build it. So really interesting. Okay, is there anything else that we don't have talk about yet that you want to talk about?
It's all about reuse. It's all about contributions. It's all about the community. I mean, we're making sure that we're making sure that all people that want to contribute and use Uno and want to contribute to Uno is that the bar is as low as possible. So so that if you find anything that doesn't work, just let us know there. So it's all about you, the people using Uno to help us move forward.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. And how can the listeners get in touch with you or the Uno team?
So the best way to get to the project is go to Uno Platform GitHub. There's a few sets of links there that go to. So we're active on Gitter, Twitter. So Twitter, if you search for Uno Platforms, you can ask your questions directly there. On Gitter as well.
Okay.
So yeah, that's how you can reach to us.
I will add all that information in the show notes as well, so it will be easy to find them.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining me.
My pleasure.
Have a nice day.
You too.